అజయ్ కుమార్ అజయ్ కుమార్ గారి గురించి చెప్పాలంటే డాక్టర్ అని చెప్పాలో, ప్రొఫెసర్ అని చెప్పాలో, కామ్రేడ్ అని చెప్పాలో అర్థం కావట్లేదు. అన్నిటికంటే పెద్ద పదం కామ్రేడ్ కాబట్టి కామ్రేడ్ అజయ్ కుమార్ పట్నాయక్ గారనే అనుకుందాం. అజయ్ కుమార్ పట్నాయక్ గారు తను చదువుకునే రోజుల్లో జేఎన్యు ఏఎస్ఎఫ్ స్టూడెంట్ లీడర్గా పనిచేశారు. ఆ తర్వాత పిహెచ్డి చేసిన తర్వాత జేఎన్యూలో దీని కింద ఇంటర్నేషనల్ అఫైర్స్, సెంట్రల్ ఏషియా అండ్ రష్యా అండ్ సెంట్రల్ ఏషియా స్టడీస్లో పిహెచ్డి చేసిన తర్వాత ఆయన డీన్గా పనిచేశారు. ప్రస్తుతం రిటైర్డ్ అయ్యారు. అలాగే మన అజయ్ కుమార్ పట్నాయక్ గారు 4 పుస్తకాలు రాశారు. వాటి పేర్లు రూట్లెట్, అనామిక, కోనార్, న్యూ లిటరేచర్. అలాగే ఆయన చాలా ఫ్రీక్వెంట్గా రష్యా వెళ్తూ ఉంటారు. అక్కడ యూనివర్సిటీలో విజిటింగ్ ప్రొఫెసర్ కింద కూడా లెక్చర్లా ఇస్తూ ఉంటారు. ఇంకా ఇంకా చెప్పాలంటే మన అజయ్ కుమార్ గారి గురించి ఆయన ఆధ్వర్యంలో 56 మంది పిహెచ్డీలు, 68 మంది ఎంఫిల్ పట్టాలు పుచ్చుకున్నారు. ఇంకా ఇంతటితో ముగించి అజయ్ కుమార్ గారి గురించి చెప్పాలంటే చాలా ఉంది. ఇక టైం చాలా తక్కువ ఉంది కాబట్టి మైక్ అజయ్ కుమార్ గారికి ఇస్తున్నాను.
Friends and comrades, first of all, I'll thank All India Progressive Forum, Krishna District, and my personal thanks to Comrade Zamindar, who contacted me, invited me, and I have never been so close to this state. Odisha is not very far from Andhra. Never been to this part of Andhra Pradesh. I got a chance to see, and because of him, I am getting an invite from Visakhapatnam. They want me to go and speak there. So tomorrow I will leave for all this. Thank you. And I was impressed that you made a very good presentation. So created a good background for this discussion. Now, this war has been going on for more than 52 days now. But where do I put this war? Is it a war between Russia and Ukraine? Is it a war between Russia and the United States and NATO? Is it a war between two parts of Ukraine? There are many dimensions to this war. It's not one-dimensional war that Russia is only fighting Ukraine. Russia is fighting to save one part of Ukraine from another part. It's a very complex war. So it is trying to protect the eastern Ukraine and south from the west Ukraine and the Ukrainian government. And they're also fighting to take this part back into Ukraine and under its control. As you can read in newspapers, NATO is not entering into Russia, but its presence is everywhere in Ukraine. Everywhere. Look at the kind of weapons they are giving. Instead of talking to Russia and Ukraine to stop the war, you can see the amount of weapons, fighting capability, their consultants, their advisors. They are all over Ukraine and they are advising. And their satellite images, their information war, their propaganda. You cannot get any news from Russia in the international among the international audience. You cannot get Russian point of view, Russian perspective. What you hear on our TV channels and all over the world are the Western point of view. So there is an information war, misinformation campaign, and propaganda battle. So they blocked other information. Whatever you read, sometimes when I was watching our TV, I thought anybody will believe Ukraine is going to hoist the Ukrainian flag on Kremlin. He spoke like this. Russia is losing the battle and everything. Now the second point is, when did the war begin? He explained to some extent. Did it begin in 1997 when NATO decided to expand eastward? Or did it begin in 99 with the bombing of Belgrade, Yugoslavia? Like it is happening now. Please remember, Yugoslavs, Serbians mainly, after Yugoslavia was like Soviet Union, it has probably gone into 8 different countries. Serbia is the biggest part, and they have same cultural stock, same cultural stock. They are called Slavs. Yugo means south, Yugoslavia means southern Slavs, Slavs of the south. Russians are the Slavs. And the Slavs created a state in the medieval times, in the 10th century, in what is known as Kiev, on which the war is being fought. That was called Kiev and Rus. The Slavs created a federation in Kiev. After that, the Mongols came and they destroyed all that. So the Yugoslavians were the Slavs, and Russia was helpless, tolerating, getting humiliated, seeing 78 days massive bombing by NATO on Belgrade. They belong to same stock, Orthodox Christians, not Roman Catholics, not Protestants. They have their own Christianity, Orthodox Christians. So whether 99, then comes, as he said, the inclusion of Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia into NATO, which are former Soviet republics. Is that the starting point where Russia starts worrying? And or it is the regime change in 2003 in Georgia, 2004 in Ukraine. This starts the regime change through American, Western sponsored NGOs, civil society networks. They created 10 years, they invested anything, like anything. Because Russia, Ukraine, everybody was running towards America for help. They were going to IMF, World Bank for help. They took advantage. They said, we will tell you how to create a market economy. You had this socialist system, break it. Overnight, it is called shock therapy. So you don't have to, you can treat a patient with a shock. Why wait for a long-term treatment? So shock therapy. Overnight, price is liberalized. Price control of Soviet times gone. Their currency crushes. And in 90s, they were all aware of it. Nobody was taking ruble, their own currency. Nobody, no taxi, nobody will take ruble. The next day, its value would be zero. Then selling government property to private through voucher privatization, that is another scandal. You distribute vouchers to workers. That means worker will get the share of this factory. When your voucher value next day is falling from 10 rubles to 8, 8 to 7, they all started selling their voucher to somebody who had some money. He purchased, he took the vouchers and he became the owner of the factory. Voucher privatization. Then heavy loans. The government took loans from the bank and knowingly they defaulted and gave the government property to the banks to sell. So many scams during Yeltsin period. During this phase, they controlled this area which was called Soviet Union. These governments had gone bankrupt because Soviet system was, every republic was dependent, interdependent. You produce something here, you produce something there. You share water, we will give you electricity. You see, if you are having upper riparian state and the water comes from your state, we will give you energy. But now they've stopped, and they might fight wars on water in Central Asia, among Uzbekistan, Tajikistan. So what kind of situation we have landed ourselves into with this sudden collapse of Soviet Union? And the three states which started the Kievan Rus of 10th century, they came together again. Slavics, Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, they came together. Suddenly one night decided we are going out of Soviet Union. Soviet Union was not disintegrated by smaller republics. These three big brothers, they decided Soviet Union should be dismantled. We are out of it. They left. A very good friendship among them. And they were running to West. They created this NGOs. By 2003, in Georgia, next year in Ukraine. And that got given very fancy names. Georgia was called Rose Revolution. Rose Revolution. And what kind of revolution? Nothing, just the leadership. The one who was leader, his election was disputed, so they said, we don't accept this election. Massive protests, so the president resigns. Same thing happened in Ukraine, Orange Revolution. But these were steps leading to something. These were trying to control the governments and the regimes who are totally pro-West, who can be used against Russia in future. And why they did these states? These states were bordering Russia first. Secondly, these states had historical problems with Russia. And thirdly, these states had internal divisions, which the West can take advantage of. They had internal problems. I'll tell you that. So, Russia was the target because the only state capable of destroying America. No other power after 1991 could destroy America. Only Russia. So that remained a problem in American mind, that there is a country which can destroy us. It should not be allowed to exist or grow or remain strong. They could not accept this fact that Russia remains strong, though it is pro-American now, pro-Europe now under Yeltsin, but it has the capacity to destroy America. So that became the target. That in future it can again, because Russia is a country, you can see on the map. Now, you cannot imagine what size of that country is. Cannot imagine, even in your dreams, there are 6 time zones, different time zones in that country. How many? 8. 11 time zones. So, you can imagine what vastness of this country, its resources, any materials you name, any resource, natural resource, you will find in abundance in Russia. Too many, too much. That's the kind of country we are talking about, which can any day rise back and again lead many countries against the US domination. So even if US was close to Russia, but it was planning in advance how to contain Russia, contain. This was the term old-timers might know, containment, during Cold War, containment. This theory, that Soviet Union has to be confined, contained, so that it cannot play any global role, containment of Russia. Now the popular term is containment of Russia, containment of China. So you have many states around it who will be constantly, fighting with this big power, so they cannot play international role. And neighborhood, Georgia, Ukraine, even Kyrgyzstan, situation is arising from, you can put the date also to 2003 when Georgia and then next year Ukraine, they changed the president, government by violent protests. And the pro-Western governments come and take over there. And since they take over, next is the demand to become NATO members. They put a request to become NATO members and to join the European Union. and they become in their relationship with Russia, they become hostile. They take the country away from Russia in all manners. This is the trend we have seen after color revolutions and regime change. At the same time, 2003-4, other things were happening. If you remember, which was showing how blatant NATO had become. It was called a defensive organization against Soviet Union and socialist countries to protect Europe. Look at what happened to this organization. Warsaw Pact was dismantled. NATO remains. It had no reason to remain. It was created to defend against Soviet Union and socialist countries when there is no socialist country, but it remained. Not only remained, it played such a violent role all over the world. Please imagine, he was mentioning something. Afghanistan, after Belgrade bombing, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, anywhere, there was no control over this power. The America and its allies, no control. They can go and use force anywhere without any challenge or question. Countries were feeling helpless against this power. How to control it? They control both things, power and financial institutions. They can stop aid and assistance to you, your country, by controlling IMF and World Bank. Nobody will give you any money. So at one level, they were changing your economy into market economy, letting American Western goods come in, their investors, their banks, their financial institutions come in. The other level, if you are not, you are trying to protest, resist, on some pretext they can bomb you. You remember Iraq, they said weapons of mass destruction. Somewhere they will say Saddam Hussein, so what if you don't get any weapons of mass destruction? He was an evil man. So evil man, you can go and kill the president of another country. This kind of logics were given. So 2003-4, we see this is happening. On the one side, you are going into neighboring countries of Russia and changing governments, bringing in presidents who are openly pro-American. Some of them were, you see, Georgia's president was a practicing lawyer in America. He was brought in Saakashvili. So such kind of people were put in power. The other side, in the name of war on Afghanistan, they created two military bases inside Central Asia for the first time in history. The British tried it in the 19th century, which we call old great game, the great game. British tried to go through Afghanistan. Russian Empire tried to spread into Central Asia. Finally, in 1907, the agreement was signed. Afghanistan was made neutral country. Nobody will go into Afghanistan. But Russian Empire had spread into Central Asia. Those Uzbekistan had one American base, Kyrgyzstan had one Air Force base. So on the other side of Russia, the Central Asia, you have American base, military base. You have on this side and South Georgia, you have hostile government. Ukraine on the west, southwest, you have another hostile government. So Russia obviously had a sense of encirclement, that it is being encircled. And it will not be allowed a freedom to act internationally. Its strategic autonomy, everything can be done. Breaking that country into various parts, because every country has its own problem, ethnic, language, and many things. But why did they choose these countries? Because historically, Ukraine, Georgia had problems with Russia from Tsarist times. They can use this kind of historical sentiments because most post-Soviet republics, please understand, as progressive people can understand better. So reference to Marx was to Lenin. How he handled, this is an example of finest mind, how he solved the national question in Soviet Union. Tsarist Russia was a prison house, he calls prison house of nationality. All nationalities were under some kind of repression, their culture, their language, their religion was not allowed. Because Russian culture identity was dominant. How Lenin wanted to free it, and arguing against Stalin and others, even Rosa Luxemburg, he said, no, our various nationalities should have their own political territorial identity. Their nations should have their territorial identity, their own territories, over which they would have certain political, economic, cultural autonomy. Within that area, which yeah. Not in the name of working class Georgian workers, Russian workers, Ukrainian workers, we are brothers. Now it's a socialist country. Why should have nationality policy? We are now realizing it. Caste is important. You cannot, in the name of class, ignore the caste problems in society, the social problems, the gender issues. There are many other issues you have to focus on. So, Lenin was insistent Ukraine got its statehood. Though part of Ukraine, Western Ukraine, was taken away by force. During those periods when civil war was being fought, they took away and merged it with Poland. And Poland has been sometimes divided between Russian Empire, Austrian Empire, and Prussian Empire. So, and this Western Ukraine has been also going to through Poland, sometimes under Austria, sometimes under Prussia, and things like that. So they have a distinct culture, as was rightly said. They were Roman Catholics like Poles. Their language became different. Their orientation was different. Whereas the eastern part, which will remain since 1918, during Tsarist period, this part was with Russian Empire. But again, 1918, it was separated. Stalin in 1941 rejoined when Nazis invaded. He took this part and rejoined. Then there was war. Nazis occupied Western and Eastern Ukraine. Massive war. All of you know the Second World War. Then it was finally rejoined. And the Soviets built this area. It was a fine industrial republic. Two of their leaders, both Khrushchev and Brezhnev, their career was spent in Ukraine. And their whole Brezhnev's network, which was known as Dnepropetrovsk Mafia, because he has party networks there, and they backed him in Moscow. So Ukraine was very well developed. But this fault line between West and East remained. And when you break the Soviet system of nationality relations, please remember, the finest system, every big nation had a republic. And within a big nation, there are smaller nations. They were given autonomous republics. And smaller ones, autonomous region, district. Various levels of autonomy was given to nationalities of different size. In a small republic like Tajikistan on Afghanistan border, we had Gorno-Badakhshan, the Badakhshan mountain autonomous republic. In Uzbekistan, we had Karakalpak. So they created these structures and protected, because the Soviet Union was not a national state, it was a supranational, beyond nation, multinational. So they protected these identities and people. And the moment Soviet Union is gone, what ideology took the vacuum, the space? It was nationalism, 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 everywhere. They rewrote history, they accused the other nations that they had been there. They started demanding more and more areas, that this was our national territory, we need more areas, these were all our areas. So, rewriting of history, changing names, place names, street names, everything was being done. Most Soviet republics, post-Soviet republics, and the nationalist leaders were coming to power. So on the one hand, you have the rise of nationalist kind of sentiments, and then the Western penetration into this area, because they wanted to dismantle socialism forever in future, including the welfare state. Globalization said liberalization. State has no role in welfare or redistribution of wealth. Nothing. It should be private. Leave it to market forces. So this kind of events were happening, and these nationalist forces obviously they were clashing with each other. In Georgia, there were two republics, autonomous republics, Abkhazia, South Ossetia. before even Russia came to picture, they were fighting with Georgia that if you are taking away our autonomy, which was in Soviet period, why should we remain with you? They fought. Georgia could not win the war. It was a frozen conflict with Russian peacekeepers, OSC or European peacekeepers, and so on. And in 2008, after this kind of revolution and regime change, they tried with the NATO membership demand, NATO support, they tried to take these regions by force. And these republics had been demanding that we want separation and to go to Russia. Because half of Ossetia is in Russia already. It is there. But this part, which is in Georgia, they wanted. Russia said no. They were not allowing it. But 2008, the kind of atmosphere they were creating against Russia, Russia went into war with Georgia, and these two regions became separate. I can see the same thing happening to Ukraine. That if you work against Russian interest, what option it will have? It will create buffer area where NATO cannot come close to Russian border. It has done that in Georgia. It can do that in Ukraine, eastern Ukraine, southern Ukraine. This whole area will be under Russian control or influence where NATO troops cannot come in. Unless Ukraine wants to save its own territorial integrity, enter into some arrangement. And the Minsk arrangement was a good arrangement in 2014. Where I come to 2014 is very important. 2014 is a critical year for this war. Most critical. 2014, when the most violent overthrow took place. And the picture he was showing was this Nazi or ultra-nationalist. They were holding the banners of this, Bandera, Stephen Bandera was a leader of Ukrainians in 30s. They collaborated with Nazis and killed many Jews and Russians in this area. And such groups, they are being glorified. Their flags are being brought, and fire and everything, fire bombs were thrown into many policemen, many protesters died because there are also ordinary protesters. And the president, after signing an agreement previous night with France, Germany, and other powers, with Russia, he ran away from this country. And strangely, this president is Yanukovych. Yanukovych had been ousted in 2004 Orange Revolution, earlier also. Then his party in 2007 came to a majority. His party became the majority party in parliament and he became prime minister. Then in 2010, in the presidential election, he wins again. And the blue-eyed boy of the West, Yushchenko, gets 5.5% vote. And they're saying it is such a democratic revolution in 2004. That fellow got less than a 6% vote. Could not go to the second round. Second round with somebody else. So Yanukovych ousted twice because his roots are in eastern Ukraine, part of Ukraine, which is the industrial base. Soviet Union created a lot of industrial base in this Donbas region, eastern part of Ukraine. He was not liked because he was soft towards Russia. What is his softness? From 10 to 14, he was negotiating with EU for a accession agreement, how it can go to EU. But at the same time, if Ukraine goes to EU, it has costs vis-a-vis Russia because Russia is creating a Eurasian Economic Union. Since 2015, 5 countries of former Soviet Union as part of Eurasian Economic Union. So there is freedom of movement of people, labor, capital, goods, everything. And around these 5 countries, we have one single customs zone. Any goods from other non-member countries will face same custom duty at any point they enter these 5 countries. And Ukraine had agreed previously to become part of this common economic space. But under this regime change and all, they withdrew. So Yanukovych said, I need some more time. Because Russia is our main trading partner. 3 million Ukrainians were in 2014 working in Russia. And the money they sent was very critical for Ukrainian economy. But no, You have to sign now. Even like a dotted line. And he said no. The next day, there was violent demonstration against him. It was not even an election which can be declared uh, fraud by the Americans or Europeans. There's no election also. But just protest, you go. So he left. 2014 was the dividing, as a critical line, because 2014 we saw the maximum participation of this hardcore nationalist elements mobilization and marginalization of the Eastern Ukrainian who were mostly either Russian speaking people or ethnically Russian also. They had migrated sometime in no in the past generations to this part during industrialization. So they were marginalized. Immediately the law was passed to ban official use of Russian language as an official language. And then they protested. During the protest, there was severe repression. I have seen if you had seen the pictures of 2014 in Odessa, Odessa had been, it's a most beautiful city. Russians had created this, Catherine the Great had created this state, this town. Beautiful city. The Russian speaking people there. They just were marching in a protest. It was shown on all English television channels in the West. They were chased, violent mob. They went in the trade union building, Soviet time trade union building. They entered into it. They put it on fire. 31 people were burnt inside and 18 were killed, 17 were killed on the steps of the trade union building. This is the kind of violence I'm talking about. Then the attack by a whole government and forces against its own people. And the Donbas region, which has two major provinces, Donetsk, Luhansk. They say Luhansk, Russian could be Lugansk. They had almost shrunk to one-third of the provincial size because two-thirds is occupied by Ukrainian forces, constantly selling bombing. 8 years, nearly 14,000 people were killed in this. So you have fighting among yourselves. Your government is fighting its own people, bombing them, killing them, striking at missiles, and still not able to win. And and NATO is expanding, giving deadlines, and these people demanding NATO membership. Even Ukraine went for a constitutional amendment to put it in constitution that they want to become members of NATO. Sims talked about Bucharest conference where NATO expansion, towards Georgia and Ukraine was decided. Putin made a very strong plea at the Munich Conference of Security, 2008. He said, don't do this because you are using force everywhere, unbridled, no chain, no lagam on you. But they laughed at him. They laughed at him. Like they laughed at him in December when he again pleaded, don't do this, don't expand, don't include Ukraine. December of 2021, he's saying, pleading. They were laughing that do you have a veto on us who will become member of NATO? So, old timers remember Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962, when they asked for protection and Soviets were going to install some missile equipment and all that in Cuba. The American nuclear warship confronted Russian warships, Soviet warships, and said, whatever happens, we will go into war. The Soviets withdrew, avoided a major nuclear conflict that time. Point is, major power will not allow another major power or alliance to be on its border every day threatening. And today's missiles, forget 62, now can split second they can destroy Moscow from the border. Who will allow it? So the division within the country was taken advantage of by the West and NATO. How to use one part against the others, and the other part is close to Russia, using this division, promoting nationalism. Somebody said, how can you say that the Americans can promote neo-Nazis or Nazi-type elements when Zelensky is a Jew himself, president of Ukraine. He said, Americans have great experience. You remember Afghanistan? Whom did they bring together? So-called democratic liberals were fighting the Soviets and the extreme Islamic militants. They brought together the same platform to fight the Soviets. They did not use the democratic platform. In Europe, they will use democratic platform during Cold War to criticize Soviet Union, to create open society. But rest of the world, they can go with any dictator, any extremist element, radical element to fight their enemy. We have seen how they armed the radical extremists in Afghanistan, including the Taliban, with Stinger missiles. So they can do anything. Now, this is the background of the war. That's a war, sometimes very painful to watch it because human lives are lost. War is very dehumanizing, every war. And some of the poorest people and women, they're the biggest victims of any conflict and war in society. So it is dehumanizing, it is sad, it's everything. But we have to analyze the war because unless we do that, and the way this world order, he said, has been run, people have to be aroused that if this world order goes on, more wars will come. Ukraine is nothing compared to how many wars we have seen since 99. How many wars we have seen, how many bombing. Forget about Vietnam's past, carpet bombing, massive bombing of Iraq, bunker busters and whatever name they give. Eh? So you have to analyze it. In that, I find the war is actually being fought by NATO to maintain a global order which they have created since the end of Cold War. This global order is based on unipolarity. There will be one pole, that is America and its allies. No other pole will remain. One pole, unipolar world order. And unipolar world order has been maintained through unilateral wars. Unilateral. One side decides to declare war, doesn't go to the United Nations. They are talking about rule-based international order everywhere. As this international order that exists, is it rule-based? All the wars I mentioned. Has America gone to the United Nations for sanctions for war? They have not. They have created their own coalitions, have gone in outside the UN. America doesn't even recognize the International Criminal Court. Doesn't even recognize the International Criminal Court. What kind of order we are talking about? So, this order is unilateral, unipolar, it has to be changed. And to change it, countries like India, China, Brazil, South Africa, many of these countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America, they have realized it is in their interest to have a multipolar world order. World should have multiple poles, not one single pole. And in the process, in last 20 years, we have many emerging economies who have become economically powerful. Look at China and India's growth. Brazil. These are many countries are rising faster. Then United States and Europe, whose economies were devastated in 2008 economic crisis. And 2008 economic crisis, the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, BRICS, they had little impact on them. That is why they could really show that we are strong enough to withstand this kind of economic challenges. We need reform of the international order. And they demanded that the voting share in the IMF should change. And that time, because of the crisis, they considered minor change in China's vote strength in IMF, minor change in India's vote strength. But what they did from that is more important. They knew that nobody gives up power so easily. The West will not give up its control of the international institutions and global order. So they tried to create alternative institutions. And the outcome was, if you remember, the BRICS Bank, the new development bank was created. So the BRICS Bank and the contingency reserve arrangement, where you can get the $100 million loan, reserve is there. You can take from that without conditionalities. Unlike in IMF, World Bank, very less interest, long term, no conditionality. Then Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank, AIIB. These are institutions coming up. Only problem that we visualize is, as these institutions came up, the West started creating more and more rift between these countries. And our bilateral issue with China is coming in the way. And again, here in the Asian continent, the West is utilizing, like it did in case of Ukraine or Georgia, using it against Russia. So our bilateral problem with China is coming in the way. If we can resolve that issue, then we can have much better alternative, order, much easier and quicker alternative system or order in place. But it is coming because it is easy to divide because of our own bilateral border issues. So that is a problem. And then sometimes these countries have, like Brazil, we had great president like Lula and Dilma Rousseff after that, the socialists. Then came the anti-socialist president who in the same Trumpian manner, the Brazilian Bolsonaro. They are all, different mavericks, can say anything, right-wing types. They're close to US. He was very close to Trump, Bolsonaro. So this kind of orientations also changes. World order is not very easy thing to change the American, European, because they control information, institutions in our country, everywhere. Very difficult. But this war, in my opinion, has opened some cracks. It's like a dike. I was looking at your barrage. If a small crack, gradually the flow of water might open that crack more and finally lead to the collapse. It may not immediately happen, but cracks have opened up with this war. War has done many things. That West is not the only superpower. In some situations, it is helpless to go in. It is not Iraq it is facing, it is not Afghanistan it's facing. It cannot just go in and fight. So, there, the Western countries are helpless in directly fighting the Russians. So, there is a limit to their strength and power. That is now shown that there is a limit how much they can display their power and strength. Secondly, their their allies have serious doubts. Syria, they could not change the regime. Afghanistan, they ran away in the manner they ran away. We had seen scenes in my student days in South Korea. People were running after helicopters. Americans just left them and left in their own helicopters. South Korea. Sorry, South Vietnam. So there'll be more credibility issue. People will not give them more credibility now. Many of the countries. And they cannot bully them that you do this, otherwise you will pay the consequences. Look at the way India answered Jaishankar. Look at the way he has retorted in his own manner, but very, very, very sharp if you look from American perspective. Not only we are not voting against, we are not voting against Russia, we are abstaining, but he just made many comments which are sharp. So countries like India will start speaking out. Third, the currency, the sanctions, it is not affecting Russia. As I said, Russia is a country which buys less from the world and sells more. What were their rich doing in this period of market economy? Their rich was investing in Britain, in Europe, in real estate, and what was being sold from Europe, wine, chocolate, cheese. They can do without these things. They have their own beautiful cheese, Russian cheese. They have beautiful Russian chocolates. So, but they have huge wheat and energy, the coal, fertilizer, everything they have. Now they've started to sell their products away from the West. Till now, West had a monopoly of most of Russian resources. monopoly. That Western monopoly of over Russian resource is going to go. And then Russia will find market in Asia and other parts of the world. That is global south. Thirdly, they have started finding alternative to dollar supremacy. You see, American supremacy is based on dollar since 1972, when dollar became the reserve currency for everything. And they can print dollar as much as like, because everyone needs dollar. The moment nobody gets dollar, then they're gone. So the process has started. I'm not saying dollar can be replaced, because Russia, China, Russia, India now are trading in their own currencies. We can pay Russia in ruble, in rupee. They can pay us in rupee. We can pay in ruble. Same thing with China. That was like Indo-Soviet trade. So alternative to dollar trade, alternative to SWIFT system. Russia, China, they have their own SWIFT system where the information, is shared for financial transactions. Information sharing is called SWIFT system. Russia has its own. India has its rupee system. They will get more developed, more developed. So there are alternatives that are possible, being tried now, and if the situation continues, because ultimately Russia has bailed the cat. Who will bail the cat? That was the problem. So it has bailed the cat, gone into direct confrontation here. In Syria, it was remote, but here in the heart of Europe, and with all the money and investment Americans have done in Ukraine, it is a big blow to them, big blow to America and NATO if Russia succeeds in Ukraine. So it's very important that in this war, the NATO and its machinations, it doesn't succeed. If it succeeds, then world will be silent for many, many decades in future. Nobody will dare to speak up. If such a massive power can be, silenced, defeated, or cornered power like Russia, and China has never been militarily, very proactive outside its region, but that's how China sees. So China will not take any risk. The problem will begin then. So in a way, I've tried to explain why this war was, in a way, in my opinion, was inevitable. And Russia has been warning, speaking, requesting for discussion, for some kind of assurance. They did not give. And what we are hearing from many sources is they're not interested to end this war. You see, the American interest is the war should go on. Russia will bleed. Okay, more and more financial expenditure Russia will do for fighting this war. More and more sanctions will buy it. So they wanted to prolong. And more anti-Russian image will come on the television channels, more and more propaganda can be. And then money they are making out of selling weapons. Huge amounts of money they are earning by selling weapons to Ukraine. All these are accounted for. Nobody gives free. Ukraine has to take loans and pay it back. So this is the kind of system that is emerging. But I have a positive approach that alternative will emerge from this war. Alternative will emerge. And countries will think thousands of times. Imagine just your money, your central bank's money, RBI money in dollar can be frozen like that. And they will say no. They did it to Iran. They did it to Afghanistan recently. Now Russia. So every country will be worried that our money, any day we have problems, they will say, no, you cannot take your money, frozen. And you take over their money. This kind of system will not, every country will be aware of this system and try to move away from that system, where dollar dictatorship and dollar being instrumentalized to achieve political goals, that will become a problem for many countries in future. They will look for alternative barter systems, currency swaps. You buy our currency, keep it in your reserve. Whenever you use it, you can buy our products. We did it with Iran when there were sanctions. You know, we paid through our products and Iran was giving us oil. So many alternatives will emerge from this war, and I hope that this war will lead finally to a new kind of world order, or at least start the process towards that. Thank you.
Professor Ajay Patnaik sir, comrade, almost 50 minutes చక్కటి ఇంట్రడక్షన్ మంచి ఉపన్యాసం ఇచ్చారు. ఆయన చెప్పిన దాంట్లో ప్రకాశం బ్యారేజ్ ఒక హెయిర్ క్రేక్ లాంటిది వస్తే ఏమవుతుందో అట్లాగే ఇప్పుడు ప్రపంచ ఏకధ్రువ ప్రపంచానికి మాత్రం నీట వాసింది అనేది స్పష్టంగా చెప్పారు. దాంట్లో చాలా ఉదాహరించారు, దాని నేపథ్యం అంతా కూడా చెప్పారు. సో నౌ ఐ రిక్వెస్ట్ మీ సందేహాలు అంటే ఉపన్యాసంగా రాసిస్తారా లేకుంటే అడుగుతారా? ప్రశ్న రూపంలో ఇస్తే సమాధానం చెప్తే చర్చ మరికొన్ని విషయాలు బయటపడడానికి అవకాశం ఉంటుంది. ఎందుకంటే ప్రొఫెసర్ అజయ్ పట్నాల్ గారికి చాలా ప్లెంటీ ఆఫ్ నాలెడ్జ్ ఉంది. సెంట్రల్ ఆసియా, యూరోప్ మొత్తం అంతా కూడా బాగా అధ్యయనం చేసిన ఆయన. మంచి అవకాశము. క్లుప్తంగా మీరు రాసిచ్చినా సరే, క్లుప్తంగా ప్రశ్నలు అడిగినా సరే.
Sir, 2 days ago, Russian ship was completely destroyed by Ukraine, and there are rumors that Russia may take revenge by using nuclear weapons. Are there really chances?
You see, when you go to a war, Ukraine is not a small country, it's a big country, and it had its military missiles, everything is supplied by the West, NATO. So we cannot ignore that Ukraine doesn't have anything, and you will, like going for a picnic into Ukraine to win this war. Russia knew that there will be some damage to it. And as I read from the Russian channels, Russian newspapers, it got fired their inquiry. It could be a missile strike, or it could be a fire on the ship. And there were many ammunitions kept.
Sir, you are not held out peace prospects. How long this war will continue? When it will come to an end? When peace will be restored? Question number 1. Question 2. What working class in Ukraine and in Russia, what is their duty? Not only working class, democratic forces. Because Putin is not a Democrat. Of course, we understand the genuine concerns of Russia regarding its security, regarding its existential threat. But is there any other alternative to address the security concerns of Russia without resorting to this war?
Good question.
First, I'll take the second question. I think after listening to Putin 3-4 days back, he said this war is for him is very painful. I talk to Russian friends who have in his seminars we interact. Some have come also in between. They're pained by the fact that there is a war with Ukrainians. Every Russians. Most of them have family, relatives, and many cultural links with Ukraine. It's not a pleasant war for Russians or the Russian leadership. But the war, in my view, was thrust on them. We can argue whether they should have gone at that point of time or waited long. There is a moral aspect to any war. War is never a morally good thing to do. But whether there was any option or not, That we can debate. But it was in a way forced on Russia. Because in Russian leadership viewpoint, it would have been very late. Once they declare and accept, suppose Ukraine as a member, the next day Russia cannot go in. Once they declare that Ukraine has become a member overnight, yeah. So then Russia will fight in NATO with NATO. So that is one thing. Secondly, working class. The working class is bound to suffer in a war. Let's say, in this war particularly. Why? In this war, nationalism is becoming dominant in both sides. Nationalism. And the workers are always asked to make sacrifices in the name of the nation. Please make sacrifice. Please contribute to the war effort. Forget your class demands for the time being. Your identity. You are a Russian. You are a Ukrainian. You know that kind of national sentiment. It war increases chauvinism manyfold. Normal times, whatever chauvinism is, a small war also can increase chauvinism manyfold. It will become very chauvinistic, nationalistic, patriotic. And in that atmosphere, I've seen the Ukrainian, the biggest opposition leader of the biggest party, is arrested. He's arrested because he was not speaking. You earlier, from earlier time, before the war, that don't go into conflict with Russia. Resolve this. Resolve this. He is considered nationalist, and now this funny president of Ukraine joking, knocking, says, "Let Russia give all our people they have arrested, our soldiers, and let them take this leader to Russia." So, what enhances people's nationalistic sentiment, which is very bad for democratic movement, so socialist movement, workers movement, bad if people become nationalistic. There is no class solidarity. Ukrainian workers and Russian workers, they used to have their meetings, their conferences, used to go to each other's place, meet in conferences. Now, many of them would be disliking each other. Everyone knows authoritarian. Nor is the other side. Because the other side recently determined all opposition parties. Okay. So both are not. And it has used, like all of you know, same with the other side. Please, it has mirror image, crony capitalists. His friends are very rich, powerful capitalists who make money out of selling Russian energy abroad and give them abroad. And the previous life of Russian rich, even American rich cannot compare. Investing in UK, Europe, real estate, everything. So he has promoted crony capitalism, no doubt. He has promoted an authoritarian tendency. And the progressive movement has suffered because that the working class movement. But anytime you were gaining and his popularity is going down, the West will do something to bring his popularity back. This has been my problem. Before the war, it was 38% of his popularity by Levada survey. It's a major independent survey center in Russia. Now it is nearly 80%, more than 80%. So every time the West will take a step which will again make it popular with the Crimea, made it again popular, then this war became popular. So you will find always authoritarian leaders taking advantage of nationalist sentiments, war situations, many all over the world we have seen this, to boost their popularity and to prolong their hold over power. This is there. Yeah, please. I just 1 minute. The peace prospects were brighter if.
What are the effects of the sanctions?
I'm not here. After 1 minute, you come here, please.
Then I want to have a question.
Okay, you ask.
What are the effects of sanctions on Russia? And America is pressurizing the other countries just like India and others. How
I'll repeat.
it can, how it can
So what is the
prevent
impact
this?
of sanctions in Russia? First, I'll go to the peace process, then take.
Then we can
Yes. The peace prospects could have been brighter if Russia was talking to Ukraine. Everybody will tell you in Russia that they are actually talking to US behind the door. Behind the door, Ukraine is only listening to the Americans, not even the Europeans. And they are making the Ukrainian president today, he will say something, then he will go back. He will go back on his statement because immediately from Pentagon and Washington the pressure will come. How did you do this? What are you doing? He said that he was ready to be neutral country. Just that is enough. Neutral country means he cannot join any military alliance, either Russia or European. But again, day before yesterday, Putin said that he is changing his statement. What can you do? Because he is not negotiating. He is handlers according to Russia. They are putting pressure on him to not to concede, not to give up. Because the war suits the other side, not Ukraine. Ukrainian people are suffering. Their country is devastated, I'm telling you. Their industries, their infrastructure, airports, airfield, everything is gone. It will take huge amounts of money and effort to rebuild that. But still, he is being pushed not to negotiate. Countries like Turkey, countries like France, they try and they fail, because it changes. The strings are pulled by the Americans actually. They have too much stake. Americans have too many things at stake. They've invested heavily. Political capital, military, defense capital, everything they've invested in Ukraine. They cannot give it up. And no question how Russia will manage the sanctions. Let's say Russia is full of resources. Full of resources. One. And it doesn't buy much, It produces enough things of its own resources. Except maybe high-tech things and all. And every time there is a sanction, we have seen, against India also I have seen. You have this cryogenic engine technology. We have seen under Western pressure refuse to give to India. They said you can buy engines from us by paying money, but not the technology. And over few years, India developed this cryogenic technology. So every time a country is banned from accessing technology, they somehow develop it. They develop it sometimes by their own effort, skill, sometimes by what is known as plagiarizing. You take blueprint from others, you try to create here, that China is accused of having done. So they will find alternatives in certain areas where they are weak and they need. But please remember, America is not the only leading power of high tech. There are other countries which are developing high tech and they are open to sell and buy from Russia. Most countries have refused to sanction Russia because it is not authorized by the United Nations. Middle Eastern countries, Southeast Asian countries, many of them. They said it is not a sanction by the United Nations. How much should we accept the European Union and American sanctions? So many countries are not happy with sanctions. They are afraid that America will punish them. Okay? But they will find alternative third countries. See, I think we don't have trade much trade with Pakistan. Whenever it is closed, things come through Dubai. So many other options are available in today's world to bypass these sanctions. We could do it with Iran, imagine. And Russia has been our closest ally, partner. We are doing it openly also, define the Americans. So many others will do it. China is doing it openly. So they will do what they will do is they will avoid sanctions, they will buy more from each other by paying their local currency. This is the thing that Russia wants, that you pay us ruble, and what will Russia do with so much of ruble sitting on it? It will use that ruble to buy from India, China, who have this kind of arrangement. They will do it. The Americans will try to trace it. Russia has been facing, by the way, sanctions in 2014 from China. And Russian people are used to this kind of blockade, sanctions during the Second World War. They manage because they need some potato from the garden. There's this small data farmhouse type outside the city where they grow something. Weekends they go and take it. They will manage. They manage survive in very difficult conditions. World War II, many of have heard, will not known them. 900 days blockade, 3 years, the city is being bombed, bombed, bombed. Nothing can come in to St. Petersburg. And people were eating whatever they could get, rats, cockroach, anything. But they survived and liberated their country. So Russians have this capacity to survive the Napoleonic Wars, the First World War, the Second World War, the Civil War during Soviet times, 1918 to 20. The resilience of a people to survive against all odds. And when they feel they are cornered, especially they have been cornered mostly from Europe, the European powers, they stand up. They try to resist, they try to suffer but resist. That's my view.
Sir, my name is Talib. Sir, what is the impact of this present war in India? First question. Second one is, what should be the best role for India to play at this juncture?
The role India is playing, in my opinion, is the best possible role it can play. We are given the relationship with the United States and Europe and the trade, given the relationship with China, which will gain a lot from this war, China, because the Russian dependence on China will grow. Russia will depend more on China for selling its energy, its resources. And China is a huge market of rich people. It's not a poor country. So for India, the dilemma is real, that how not to go against USA and not to go against Russia. Within that, a very thin line it is maintaining, the balance it is maintaining, and it is maintained well by abstention. Okay, by abstaining in the United Nations, it has tried to convey that we are neither for Russia nor against Russia, but our position is this. So India will definitely be under pressure as the war goes on. There will be pressure on the West. But India has conveyed from the initial, from the first stage, that we are not going to be pressured like this and that. Vote against Russia, go against Russia. They have conveyed this clearly. Now, other powers have understood that where Russia is concerned, India is very sensitive. Because in Indians' memory, in very critical times in its history, in the post-independence history, Russia stepped in, many of them, or stood by India, many of them. including during Bangladesh war. That is not very long past, not very long past, 1970. When the entire West was against India and favored Pakistan, Russia stood and other issues like Kashmir, they voted and vetoed in the United Nations. So in a period when entire Western world was trying to dictate terms to India and India was not prepared to be dictated, Russia did well. That is the memory which Indians have not forgotten. That is why in India, whatever might be our pro-American elite section might say, sitting in Delhi. But common people everywhere who I've gone to Odisha, my towns, somehow there is a love for Russia. And none of the ordinary Indians will see Russia being defeated by America. That they do not know. But in the elite sections, you will find this, among the elites, this liberal, authoritarian, democracy. Common people, they think Russia is our friend, it should not be defeated. This is the kind of thing that I think Indians feel. And that pressure will not work because they have stood up to that pressure. That first 15, 20 days was very vital, very vital. If India had succumbed that time, then Americans would have armed twisted India like anything. Now, because India stood up, every time somebody comments from the West about India, they bring in many issues. They will bring in many issues, human rights issues, democracy issues in India. And India will have, as I said, our foreign minister, Jaishankar, has retaliated in his own way. So India has taken a position, and that position gives it some leeway, some space that you cannot be branded being part of Russia's military atrocity, military this thing, attacks, war. You don't have to be branded with that. At the same time, we have been conveying somehow that we do not believe that Russia is at fault in this war. You conveyed that this was done very well by Shiv Shankar Menon. When during 2014 he said the famous statement that Russia has genuine security concerns. That time also India did not vote against Russia. The BRICS countries did not vote against Russia. In 2014, when Crimea was integrated with Russia again. Shiv Shankar Menon said. So Indian position has been highlighted since then on this Ukraine issue by Shiv Shankar Menon, now Jaishankar, that we somehow understand Russia has genuine security concerns. The way NATO has broken its border. We are not openly saying the war is a good thing and we support the war. We are not saying this was the only alternative. I'm talking about Indian point of view. And we will not be pressurized into taking positions. And so far as Russia is concerned, after some time we will find that wars will settle down eventually. The peak of the war will settle down. Russia might have created this zone of influence, which will be secure. Then there will be more and more favorable terms of trade with India. In terms of energy, resources. Russia is, Ukraine both were major producers of fertilizer. All these are increasing the global prices. Global prices of wheat, for example, the grain is very high today because Ukraine was one of the main producers. And the supply routes are destroyed. Who buys it now? China was given 7 regions of Russia, 7 regions the permission to export to China, the grain. Now China said all regions of Russia are open to export to China. All regions of Russia. So it has opened its doors for wheat imports from Russia. Such kind of benefits will accrue to India. India has not benefited from never will. We have Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, which is flush with oil and gas. We could not bring it because of our own problem between India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, the South Asian no pipeline, pipeline to China, pipeline to Europe was already there during Soviet times. Now is the time we might benefit from the oil and gas resources of this country and others as well.
How do you put the coming together of Russia and China with no limits of in the changing global world order?
Well, when Russia and China came together, along with India, Brazil, and South Africa, we were celebrating the formation of BRICS and the role it will play, the BRICS Bank, and because of our personal bilateral problems with China, we can expect Russia and China not to come close, especially when both of them are targets of the West. Both. Till this problem came up Ukraine, China had been facing US being targeted by the US in all forums. So naturally, both the countries who want a multipolar world order, both the countries are complementary. One doesn't have gas, oil, energy, and one has in abundance. And China needs. China is a vast consumer of energy, and Russia has it. So why not? My point is, we have problems with China, I understand. But if you have a multipolar world order, what kind of multipolar world you want? Where you will say who your friends will be, or Russia will tell us who our friends will be. No, that's not multipolar. Multipolar means we all will have independent strategic autonomy to decide. Otherwise, it will be like unipolar. America says, no, no, you are with us or you are against us. So that kind of thinking has to be avoided if you want a multipolar world order. Each of these major powers will have their own preferences, their friends. Depending on the time, they will choose this or that. We cannot tell Russia, please don't go close to China. Russia cannot tell us, please don't go close to US. That is multipolarity. Okay.
So, thank you, Professor Ji. I request Chandra to say a word of thanks. Your word of thanks to say. సో చాలా అందరికీ ధన్యవాదాలు ప్రొఫెసర్ పట్నాయక్ గారికి. చాలా కూలంకషంగా సబ్జెక్ట్ మనము చర్చించుకోవడం జరిగిందని అనుకుంటున్నాం. కొత్త యాంగిల్లో చాలా ఆస్పెక్ట్స్ చూసాము. లెట్ us hope that unipolar system will be alternated by multipolar system, and let us hope that peace talks will be succeeded. And with this, I want to conclude. Thank you very much, sir, once again. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.